Welcome to Focal Point, a show where we invite thought leaders from business, government, and our communities to share with us their journeys of success and failure, innovation and entrepreneurship, as well as the vision for Hong Kong and the world. Welcome to Focal Point. This is our second episode where we have the honor to invite with us Ms. Norma Chu, the founder of DayDayCook, as well as the Good Food Movement with us. We're very fortunate today because we're in a very special place. We're at her home. It's a very beautiful place you have.
Thank you.
So today we will be chatting with Norma about her journey as an entrepreneur and all your experiences. Because I also realized that today is or this month, or this year is a very special year. It's the 10th anniversary of DayDayCook in October.
That's right.
So this is a very timely discussion. I hope for you to have some key takeaways or summaries or experiences of what it's like to been 10 years. First of all, I would like to congratulate you because it's not easy to survive 10 years.
Thank you. I know.
For a lot of startups. So I think this is a great compliment. So congratulations. But let's start from the beginning because I think you've done a lot of interviews and talks as well. Everyone talks about how they start a business and things like that, but they don't talk enough about their life before being an entrepreneur. I know you weren't, always the entrepreneur when you started. So we'd love to talk a little bit more about, where you started. Where did you go to school? I know you grew up in Hong Kong. What made you change your mind from, whatever career you had before to become an entrepreneur? So maybe we'll start with that.
Okay, sounds good. Well, thanks for having me as your, guest today. Life before DayDayCook. It seems so long ago.
Only 10 years.
Only 10 years. I'll share a little bit about how I grew up and my family. I came from a very typical Hong Kong middle class family. Both my mom and dad are from Qiuzhou area. Both of them never really went to that much school. Like my mom, I think, finished 6th grade, my dad 7th grade, and that's pretty much it. And my dad has always been the entrepreneur in the family. He started his own company when he was 27. And I think I got a little bit of that entrepreneur spirit from him. And they've always been extremely supportive as a parent. And very, I guess, free spirit because they will let me choose, whatever subject or whatever interests me, they will let me, pursue it. And so I went to, grew up in Hong Kong, went to Marymount primary and secondary school, and then we moved to Seattle when I was 12. It's the typical early 90s before the handover where a lot of people moved to the US. And my grandmother actually has been living in the US for 40, 50 years. She moved there during her second marriage. My grandfather passed away before I was born. And so I think that's kind of what brought us to the US at that time. And went to school, studied finance. So before the whole interest in cooking, I only have two passions. One is for the stock market, and then one is for cooking.
Okay.
And so, when I was a teenager in the US, I would go to school and come back, I would watch CNBC. I would just watch, what's happening in the capital markets, and I just find it to be so, exciting. And then after that, when the market closes, I would watch Food Network. And so I studied finance, and back in the day, I really wanted to have a really good career. And of course, investment banking is kind of like the thing to do, right? If you're in finance. And so that's what I pursued, and that's what I did right after college. A couple years in investment banking, and then after that, I moved back to Hong Kong, and I switched over to do equity research. So basically, 10 years of finance before I started DayDayCook.
Well, so you did your true passion, at least you kind of planned a way and you did your first passion.
Yeah, exactly.
So what happened? How did it go from the banking world, which you seem to enjoy a lot, to the cooking world?
I always think that I'm very fortunate, right? 20 years of working now, totally dating myself. 10 years in finance, 10 years now in cooking. I think the turning point was, when I first moved back to Hong Kong in my mid-20s, a lot of my girlfriends, they didn't like cooking, but then they would ask me to teach them. But then, I was like, okay, maybe I should create something to kind of change the younger generation's perception on cooking. I wanted to make it, fun and enjoyable and not like troublesome or old school. And so I created my own platform. I wanted to change that perception for a younger generation. And I started as a hobby on the side, and I was quite busy with my daytime banking job. But on the weekend, I would then buy groceries, go cooking, and make my own videos, and I would just post it online. And I think I started really early on, so it was really relatively easier to get followers. And so within 6 months' time, I got about 100,000 followers in Hong Kong.
Wow.
And back then it's a big number. Now it's like you need 1 million to be relevant. I got 100,000 followers in Hong Kong, and then I got my first client reach out to me on Facebook, which was Lee Kum Kee. And so they're like, oh, I really like your content. I want to see whether we can collaborate. I think at that point, it just kind of made me think, hey, I have something here, right? Maybe I should pursue it, go all in into seeing where it's going to take me. And I guess the main thing that made me quit my job and do something new is that fear of regret. Yeah, because a lot of people is like, oh, you have investment banking job or equity research, you get paid pretty well. Why would you quit and go to do something that is extremely high risk? So back then I did this thinking, right? I projected like my life for the next 2-3 years. I know that if I stay in banking, I do equity research, I pretty much can see where my career will go, right? At that time I was already head of equity research. I'm going to be, continue to do well. But then I'm like, okay, but I can always fall back and do that, because I think the skill sets is going to be there. But in terms of starting my own business, doing DayDayCook, I'm like, okay, if I don't do well, then I come back to finance. But then if I don't do it and somebody do night cook and become really successful, and then I'll be like, oh, I really regret not going for it.
Right.
Because I think a lot of people would think about starting something, right? Oh, I've thought about that too, but we often regret not taking that plunge. And so I decided to go for it and just see where it goes.
Well, I think a lot of people, as you remember, in the .com days, basically thought of the same thing, and everyone went and did it. But I think the difference between the people who succeeded is really the people who took the first step, right? Because a lot of people talk about what they want to do, including myself. I talked about what I want to do, but I never did it. But was it really just your own decision? Or did your family members or somebody else, was there someone to influence you to push you over the line? Because I know it's not an easy decision, because from what you described, in a way, it sounded a little bit accidental as well, right? Because you didn't plan in the beginning to set up this channel such that you can get a client and get a business out of it. It was just accidental that someone called. So anyone important at that point in your life that helped you push you over the decision, or was it all just you?
I would love to take all the credit. No, but I think, I have a fantastic support system around me, and I think that's really important for an entrepreneur to start and for us to stay on this journey. And, speaking about my family, my parents, extremely supportive. They never question me and say, I don't think that's the right thing to do. It's too risky. They're like, great, go for it, right? And see if I need help, I can always ask them. And then another important person is my husband. And back then he was still, my boyfriend. And I think Sam, he's always been a very entrepreneurial person himself. So when I told him, hey, I think I've got something here, I really want to see where it goes, he actually sat down and we work on this business idea together. Yeah, and of course, in the beginning, if we can actually find my business plan from 10 years ago and compare it to where we're at now, of course it's very different. But I think it's important that he took the time and supported me during this early on in my journey, and that's really also gave me a lot of confidence to kind of take the risk.
Wow, I wish you go find it, because it would be amazing, and you should NFT it. It would have been an amazing NFT gift to give to your fans on the 10-year anniversary, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, so family members, but let's talk a little bit about the business itself. It's been 10 years. You mentioned a little bit how the business plan originally is very different than what it is today. What are some of the biggest differences? What's the biggest changes in 10 years?
Oh, wow. I always think there are two major decisions that I've made that I think are quite important. I think the first one is, in 2015, we started in 2012 and a very Hong Kong focused. And then 2015, we took the business to mainland China. I think that's the first critical strategic decision. And also at that time, I went against a lot of people's advice, right? Oh, don't go to mainland China. It's very competitive. It's very tough, right? You're having too much fun in Hong Kong, right? So I think that was one really important decision, because without that, I don't think the business would be where it is now.
Right.
And then another one was like 3 years ago. It's a strategic decision where we went from creating content and running our own platform to doing consumer products. So if you look at where the business is at now, the way we actually monetize the content and the brand is from selling products. And that decision came because I was looking at how the content market evolved and how the e-commerce market evolved in mainland China. I mean, TikTok has been, growing like wildfire across the world, and all the traffic is being drawn from, the typical, previous content platforms onto TikTok. And so I was like, okay, it's hard for us to just do content and try to monetize it that way. We've got to build the brand and have something of our own. And I think that's when I kind of, took another plunge once again into the unknown, because we started as a media business and then media commerce, and then going into a consumer company. But I think in hindsight, when we look back, I think those two are very important and right decisions to make.
What was the most difficult part of making that change in terms of switching to a product company? Was it, I could imagine if you went from a media company to a product company, the first thing that comes to mind is probably people, right? Because you need, it seems like a different skill set. So how did you make that transition? As a leader, how do you build a team?
Yeah. That is precisely right. I mean, like a lot of times when we do these strategic change, there's really just allocating or reallocation of resources. And the most important is just people and money. And so I think that was a tough call at the time, because obviously the structure of the organization has to change. So we have to lay off people as a fact, and then we've got to restart certain team from scratch. And so I think those are really tough calls, because as a founder, you always want to take care of your people. But at the same time, if you don't make that decision, the company might not last for the next decade, right? So I think that would be the most difficult thought process during my mind. But it's kind of like always doing something from 0 to 1 all over again. But I think that's kind of like the process of having been in the entrepreneurship journey for 10 years, right? And I have that expectation going into my next decade. It's going to be the same. I'm going to face new challenges, and we have to just kind of adapt and learn quickly, and then try to execute as best as possible. And that's what happened in 2019. So we did, we reduced a large number of engineers and reduced the size of the content team, and then we built the product team and the supply chain team. And I myself, as the founder, had to learn a lot about how to run and manage a consumer business.
Yeah.
But I think those are the fundamental importance about me having an open mind and the ability to learn, and then during that process make sure the team also stays and put the key management team players are there to kind of see us through, right? And so I'm sure that in the future, if I have the opportunity to keep doing this for the next several decades, we will have to do this all over over and over again.
So it's a constant innovation, constant change.
Yeah.
Just adjust to the market.
That's right.
But I often hear that being a founder is a very lonely place, because even just listening to what you described, there's a lot of tough decisions like firing people, teams that you hired, or just pivoting to a totally different new area. Who do you go to for advice, for consultation?
I don't have a shrink. I don't have a shrink. I think I have a good group of people that act as my sounding board, right? So when I have ideas that I wanna test out, first it's my management team, and then the board. And I respect a lot of my board members. I think they also have been with me for longer than a year or two. So a lot of them they understand, what I need to hear when I think things through.
Right.
And so I think they are a really good system I have. But, I think the most important person that I would look up to and kind of ask when times are really tough, right? And I need to make that call to make me think straight again is actually my dad.
Oh, yeah. Goes right back.
It goes right back.
The other entrepreneur.
Yeah, it goes right back to, where it all started. I remember, I think it was in the beginning of the pandemic, right? I think entrepreneurship in general, being a founder, is always lonely, but it was loneliest during this pandemic. Mainly because nobody has experienced it before. So you can't be like, hey, I'm going to call up the guy that just experienced another pandemic 2 years ago for advice. Right. So everybody was kind of figuring it out. And then I remember calling my dad and just asking him, I'm like, hey, I want to do this and this and this, but it might not work. And if it failed, do you think I would disappoint you? That was literally. Wow. You actually asked him that. I actually asked him that because I think that was important for me. Because I think a lot of time, everything that I want to do, I want to make my parents proud, and so I think that's the reason why I asked him that. And he told me, he's like, of course not. He's like, just do your best and don't think about anything else. I'm not going to look at you differently if it didn't work out. So I think that was really important for me.
Wow, you were very lucky. I don't know that many parents out there is that supportive of their children in terms of what they do. Well, what does the next 10 years hold, you think? I mean, share with us to the extent you can. It's not super confidential or whatever, about the business, about what you see. Because I think the world clearly has changed. I mean, I personally feel that the world has just did a 180 or something in the last 12 months. Yeah. A lot has changed. China has changed. Hong Kong has changed. I know 3 years ago you said you pivoted to this consumer business. So what do you envision going forward? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think so far in the past 10 years, I do think right now what we have is the most scalable, and it comes more naturally to the team in terms of how we grow this business. And there are some positive impact for our sector from everything that's been happening for the past couple of years. Like consumer in general are eating healthier, right? And because of the pandemic, most people have tried cooking at home and they would hate it. But and instead they would want to do it more at home, but of course in a more cost-effective and price-sensitive manner, right? So I think the opportunity really is for us to come up with more products that can serve that rising demand for these type of products. And interestingly enough, I think this structural change in consumer behavior is not unique to just China. We're actually seeing it in Southeast Asia and also in the US. And so for us this year, we are more aggressive and looking a lot more actively in international expansion. So last year, in December, at the very end of the year, we started selling into Canada. And then this year in the summertime in the US. And so, it is my goal to kind of, over the next 3 to 5 years, to diversify our portfolio in terms of product and customer segmentation, to have, 50% of the business come from international market in 5 years' time.
50%? Wow. And today is what?
Today is 98%.
98% domestic?
If not more, yeah.
Wow, okay. That's a pretty big goal. So we shall see 5 years. We'll hold you to it because we have it on record.
Cool.
But what, if I may turn the table a little bit, what is the most difficult decision you have to make? Or maybe I'll slightly put it this way. What is the worst decision you think you have made in the last 10 years? You obviously made a lot.
There's so many.
You made so many good decisions, but what is one of the worst ones?
Enjoyed it? Please follow our Patreon channel to learn more about international business, entrepreneurship knowledge, latest innovation, and scholars' insights, and even more. See you soon.